Good morning, first graders. You know what? It's the third day of us working on our draft of our question and answer book about polar bears. And remember that the first day, the question that we worked on was, what do polar bears look like? And then you did a picture and you wrote some facts off reading out of our mentor text, our book that we're using to get information so we can write. And then the next day, yesterday, how do polar bears eat? And we answered that question. So today, we're going to turn to our third page. And remember, we're not using the backs, we're just using the front of the paper this time. And so I'm on my little page 3 here, and we're going to answer the question today, where? Where do polar bears live? Because I noticed from looking at our books, our mentor text, the books that we're using to help us know how to do this, I noticed in the question and answer about sharks and this other one that I kind of had looked at before we started the unit, Bengal tiger, they both always tell about where the animal lives. Now, here is the problem. This book doesn't say a lot about the place that the polar bear lives. It says they live in the sea ice and on the near the water, but it doesn't really say a lot about the Arctic. So here's what a writer will do. A writer will say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to find a couple of other books or pieces of information to help me do this part of my writing. So I had to look around and find a new book, and I actually even looked on my phone. I did what's called research. Research, let me see if I can show it without, there it is. Research means that you are searching for new pieces of information, and you go to more than one place or thing or book or person to learn. So today we're going to answer the question, where do polar bears live? I'm going to write that right now. Here is that. I wrote the question, where do polar bears live? Question mark. And I counted 10 lines down and put a little dot, and then I made my picture box. And remember that over here you have lines. You have that line you can trace nice and neat, and this one and this one. But on this side there's no line, and so I used my template to match up the top and the bottom line, so I had a nice picture box. So now we need to go to our other pieces of information, the research. I happen to have in my house another book on polar bears, and it isn't really a question answer book, but it is a nonfiction book that gives information. So I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to share what I found when I did my on the internet web research about where polar bears live, and that's going to help us do our picture piece to answer the question, where do polar bears live, and our facts down at the bottom. Now, if you need to, pause it before you listen now and write that question, get it ready, and get your picture box ready, and then touch play to listen to the facts that we'll use. Here's what I want to read right here. Look at that good picture of that polar bear. Now listen, see if you can start to learn the answer we're going to write. Polar bears are the biggest and most powerful animals in the Arctic pack ice. That is what they call this part in the top of the world where it's a big, almost like a continent, because it's looks as big as some pieces of land, but it's all ice and it's surrounded by sea water. They call it the Arctic pack ice. They fear no other animal. None are large enough to challenge the polar bear. Polar bears belong to the bear family. They are closely related to brown bears. Polar bears are as comfortable on land as in the water. So I'm learning where they live they live in the Arctic pack ice near water and icy land. Just like you see, the ice freezes and it creates this kind of sheets of big floating ice, almost like it's like a ground, but it's ice. It's icy ground. And then here's the sea where they can jump in and swim or catch fish. They spend a lot of time on land and use the sea as a feeding ground. Now, when summer comes and this stuff, a lot of this ice melts, there are actual parts of land underneath all that. So they live on the land and the sea around the Arctic pack ice. I'm going to read one more. This page says, actually, it is where they live. So it's not a question, it's a sentence, but it answers where they live. Let me read this. Polar bears are found only in the Arctic pack ice. They're on the top of the world, the North Pole, we call it. When the ice melts in the summer, the bears move a little farther north to the top of that pack ice. They return to the southern part, so down a little bit off the top of the globe. They return to the southern limits of the pack ice in the winter. Polar bear populations live all around the top of the world. So this one actually has a perfect fact sentence. So if you can think of this and remember, polar bears live in the cold Arctic pack ice, but you see water, and then there are some pieces of land under there that in the winter or in the summer melt. Now, I'm going to stop and write my facts and do that first, and then I'm going to talk about what I wrote. Polar bears live in the Arctic Circle, the top of the world. That area where they live, people call the Arctic Circle, and you can kind of see that because it does look a little bit like a circle up there, that big piece of ice. So I wrote the Arctic Circle. They live near the cold ice and Arctic Sea. They spend time on land and water in summer. So you can write as much or as little, just at least a sentence, but you could write two if you want to explain more. But basically, you need to tell that they live in the Arctic pack ice and near the water in the top of the world. I want to read this little piece that I found to you to help you with your picture, and I'm going to post this just for you to look at in the lesson so that you can use this. I think today we'll make it easy on ourselves for our illustration, and we will draw the picture of the map of the top of the world for our illustration. You can do it different if you want to do something different. You could just show them near, the ice. You could draw the polar bear near the ice and the water. Using one of the pictures in that book, kind of what you remember. Or you could use this as your illustration, this map. And I'm going to post this in the template for you to look at and copy. So, but I want to read this little fact, what it says right here. There's a little piece of fact right here. It's like the polar bear talking. And it says, "This is a map of the world showing the Arctic where I live. Why do you think the Arctic is colored white?" On the map. Well, we know it's ice, right? That's what they're showing. What might that tell you about the weather in the Arctic? And we learned it's cold. It's mostly cold up there. They do have some summer where it warms up, but it's still pretty always cold in the Arctic, because we've also learned it's far away from the middle of the earth where the equator is the hottest part. All right, so you need to answer the question, where do polar bears live today? Write the facts you want to write about where they live, and then draw your picture that looks like this, and post your work. This is how I started my picture. I did a big circle to be the globe, the world, the top, and then I used my gray crayon and I kind of drew the shape, copying the shape that was on this picture, to look like the same shape as the Arctic pack ice. And I'm not going to color that in because the paper's already white. And then I'm going to add in my blue and my ocean and continent parts right now. So that's how you will do that. All right, that's your job today. And I think you'll be able to do it. And here it is when I'm all done. I filled in a lot of ocean here because I was copying that picture. And then the continent parts up here, and there's a little bit of water actually inside those continents. And then I did some labels, Arctic pack ice, and I did a arrow, and I wrote polar bear, meaning this is where they live, and it's called the Arctic pack ice. So, all right, I can't wait to see your page about where do polar bears live.